My stepmother raised her glass and said, "That's all you deserve, Jolie." Her voice sliced clean through the music, and the whole room laughed, everyone but me. My father just smiled at her like it was part of the show. I sat there, hands steady, the USB in my pocket burning against my leg. They had no idea what I'd brought with me or what I was about to do. One truth strong enough to shatter everything they'd built. Before we get into it, tap like and tell me where you're watching from. Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace, even when you knew the truth could end it all? People like to say every family has secrets. Ours didn't bother hiding them, they just called them tradition. My father, Gregory Foster, built his company from scratch. In his world, everything had to look perfect. The house, the dinners, even the smiles. My stepmother, Karen, was the masterpiece he showed off. She had this way of turning cruelty into elegance. If she insulted you, it sounded like a compliment. And then there was Shannon, her daughter, my father's golden child. I used to count how many times he said her name at dinner like it was proof that I still existed if he remembered to say mine. I grew up in that mansion in Raleigh, surrounded by chandeliers and silence. After my mother died, the air changed. Karen moved in within months, her perfume replacing the scent of my mother's lilies. The staff learned quickly, "Please, Karen, protect your job." I learned too, stay quiet, stay out of the way. Every family photo had me at the edge, half a smile, half a daughter. The only thing that ever felt real was my camera. At 16, I bought one with money I made tutoring neighborhood kids. It wasn't about art back then, it was survival. Through that tiny lens, I could frame the world how I wanted. I could zoom in on what people missed. A stray cat sleeping in the rain gutter, a hand trembling over a coffee cup. The kind of truth no one claps for, but it's still true. When I left home at 18, no one stopped me. Karen threw a polite farewell brunch like she was seeing off a house guest, not family. My father signed a check and told me to call if you need anything. I never did. Years passed. I built a career filming stories that weren't mine. Farmers losing land, veterans, rebuilding their lives, mothers raising kids alone. Real people, real pain. But every time I turned off the camera, the silence came back, whispering what I'd never filmed my own story. Then, one winter afternoon, an email arrived. "You're invited to Gregory Foster's 60th birthday celebration. Formal attire. No greeting, no signature, just that." For a full minute, I stared at the screen. And maybe this is the part where most people would delete it. I didn't. Because after a lifetime of being erased, you start craving proof that you still exist. And that invitation, it felt like proof. The closer the party came, the less I slept. My apartment in Raleigh felt smaller each night, filled with half-packed gear and the steady hum of my camera charging. I told myself I was only going to film some B-roll for a new project, but we both know that was a lie. I was going to capture the truth. Then Ellen showed up, hair-messy sketchpad under one arm, the smell of turpentine trailing her like always. She dropped onto my couch and said, "You won't believe what I heard." I didn't look up at first, but her voice had that edge that meant something was about to hurt. "Shannon was at the cafe downtown," she said. "Talking to some guy, Kyle, I think. She said Dad won't suspect a thing once the papers are signed." My chest tightened. "What papers?" Ellen shrugged. "Sounded like business stuff. But I saw her screen. It had your dad's company logo on it. We stayed up all night digging." Ellen remembered a shared cloud folder she once used with Shannon for a design gig. Same password, still active. Inside were scanned contracts, emails, and a draft transfer form. Shannon and Karen planned to move my father's company shares into Shannon's name, using Kyle as their silent partner. Every message dripped with entitlement. "Dad will thank me once it's done. Jolie will stay out of it, she always does." Reading those lines was like swallowing glass. It wasn't just greed, it was the proof of every unspoken rule I grew up under. Karen wins, Shannon shines, I disappear. Ellen looked at me carefully. "You could end them with this," she said. I nodded, but the words stuck in my throat. I could already see my father's face if I exposed it. Confused, humiliated, maybe broken. For a moment, I hated that I still cared. I copied the files to a small USB drive. It clicked shut like a gun cocking. I held it in my palm until my skin felt hot. That was my truth, my weapon, my confession. When the night was over, Ellen squeezed my shoulder. "So, what are you going to do?" I stared at the city lights outside, blurry through the window. "I'm going home," I said quietly. "But this time, I'm not coming as their daughter." The morning of the party, Raleigh was wrapped in gray light, the kind that makes everything look like a memory. I packed carefully camera gear first, then the USB, then the black dress that felt more like armor than clothing. The silence in my apartment pressed against me, heavy and expectant. I whispered, "No more filming someone else's story," and closed the suitcase. The drive to the estate felt like time reversing. Same long driveway lined with trimmed pines, same iron gate that used to groan open like a warning, but the place looked smaller now, stripped of its power. I parked under the oak tree where I used to wait for my father's approval that never came. The wind was sharp, carrying the faint smell of roses and cold money. Inside, the house glittered. Strings of lights, silver linens, champagne already flowing. Karen's voice floated across the room, warm, fake, trained for attention. She wore pearls that probably weren't hers and smiled like she owned the air. Shannon trailed behind her in a gold dress, every step rehearsed. When I appeared at the entrance, Karen's eyes flicked over me like I was an unscheduled error. "Jolie," she said, her tone sweet but taut, "you actually came." I smiled. "You invited me." "I suppose we did," she murmured. "Try not to make tonight awkward." Her words landed like ice on skin, but I didn't flinch. I'd been frozen before. My father appeared a moment later, his gray suit crisp, his confidence untouched. "Jolie," he said, sounding surprised but careful. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. He smiled politely and moved on, already pulled into another conversation. That small moment, his dismissal wrapped in charm, was the crack that let the fury through. I stayed quiet through the speeches, through the toasts, through Karen's perfect act. But every time she touched his arm, every time Shannon laughed too loudly, I felt the USB in my clutch grow heavier. When the applause ended and people began to dance, I slipped down the hallway toward his office. The portraits on the wall watched as I opened the door and set the USB beside his nameplate. For the first time in years, I wasn't shaking. He found me there a few minutes later, standing by his desk, like a trespasser in my own story. The laughter from the ballroom echoed faintly down the hall, muffled by marble and distance. When he saw me, my father stopped in the doorway, one hand still on the frame. "Jolie," he said softly, as if saying my name might break something fragile. "Karen said you'd stepped out. You shouldn't be in here." "I know." My voice was steady. I just needed a quiet place. He hesitated, then stepped inside. The lamplight hit the lines on his face, the same lines I used to trace when I was little, trying to memorize him. He looked older now, but still unreadable. "You've grown into your mother," he said quietly. "She used to stand in this office the same way, like she was searching for something that didn't want to be found." I let the words hang there. I wanted to tell him that what she'd been looking for was him, but I didn't. Instead, I slid the USB across the desk toward him. He frowned. "What's this?" "The truth," I said. "You deserve to see it before someone else does." His expression shifted, confusion first, then irritation, the reflex of a man used to control. "What are you talking about?" "Just watch it," I said. He sat down, muttering something under his breath, and plugged the drive into his laptop. The screen flickered to life. A video opened Ellen's recovered files stitched together. Karen's voice filled the room first. Calm, confident. "Once the transfer's approved, Gregory won't notice a thing until it's done." Then Shannon laughing. "He'll probably thank us. Dad loves being the hero." And Kyle's voice. "You're sure no one else has access to the files?" Karen again, smooth as glass. "Only us. Jolie doesn't even know where the company keeps its books. She's too busy chasing broken people with her little camera." I didn't look at my father. I watched the reflection of the screen in his glasses, the moment recognition hit him, the way his mouth parted just slightly. The illusion cracked. When the recording ended, the only sound left was the soft jazz leaking through the walls. He stayed very still, then whispered, "Dear God." I took a breath. "You always told me truth mattered. That integrity was everything. But you never asked if that included your own home." His hand trembled slightly on the mouse. "You could have humiliated us tonight," he said, voice low. Why didn't you? Because I wasn't trying to destroy you, I said. I just wanted you to see me. He looked up, then really looked. It felt like a foreign language we were both learning in real time. He reached across the desk, slow, unsure, and set his hand over mine. The gesture was clumsy, almost awkward, but it was the first real thing he'd done in years. I see you now, he said. Something inside me, tight and old, broke. Not in pain, but release. We stood there for a long moment, the air between us heavy with everything unspoken. Then quietly, he closed the laptop, picked up the USB, and said, "Stay here." When he left the office, I followed a few steps behind, far enough to stay unseen. He walked through the corridor and into the main hall. The music faltered when he appeared. He didn't speak loudly, but his presence drew every eye. "Karen," he said, voice calm but sharp as steel. She turned, smiling automatically. "Darling, everything all right?" "Not yet," he said. She blinked, the smile twitching. "What's wrong?" He held up the USB. "You tell me." For a moment, confusion crossed her face. Then fear, real fear. Her hand tightened around her champagne glass. "Gregory, what is this supposed to mean?" "I watched it," he said. "Every word." Shannon's expression froze, her golden confidence cracking. "Dad," he cut her off. "Don't." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, and the entire room went still. "You treated my trust like a currency you could spend. Both of you." Karen started to speak again, her tone turning syrupy. "Gregory, please. She's manipulating you." He pointed toward me, where I stood at the edge of the crowd. "She's my daughter, and she just saved what's left of this family." The silence that followed was brutal. Karen's face drained of color. Shannon's eyes filled, but not with guilt, panic. Then came the final blow. My father reached into his pocket, pulled out 2 envelopes, and set them on the table beside the untouched cake. "One is for the divorce," he said. "The other is your withdrawal notice from the company. You'll both need to find another place." Karen's voice cracked for the first time. "You're choosing her over us." He shook his head. "I'm choosing honesty." I didn't move, didn't gloat. I just watched as the empire they'd built on charm and deceit folded in on itself. The guests shifted uncomfortably, pretending to sip their drinks, unsure whether to stay or flee. Karen's eyes found mine, then sharp, pleading, desperate. The same eyes that once made me feel small, but not this time. My father turned toward the door. "Jolie," he said, voice firm now. "Let's go." And that was it. No fireworks, no screaming. Just quiet ruin. Outside, the night air hit like a shock, cold and clean. We walked across the gravel driveway, his footsteps slow, mine steady. For once, he didn't fill the silence. Halfway to the car, he said softly, "I used to think protecting people from pain was love." He paused, eyes on the dark sky. Turns out it was just avoiding the truth. I didn't answer. There was nothing to add. We drove away from the estate without looking back. Behind us, the lights of the mansion blurred into the distance, a glittering lie fading into darkness. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Justice didn't roar that night. It whispered. It walked quietly beside me in the dark, hand in hand with peace. 3 months passed before I saw him again. The mansion had been sold quietly, no announcements, no farewells, just an empty driveway and a for sale sign swinging in the wind. My father rented a small cabin by the lake, far from the noise, where the mornings smelled like pine, and the air carried nothing but the sound of water lapping at the dock. When I arrived, he was on the porch, coffee mug in hand, wearing a faded sweatshirt instead of a suit. "You found it," he said. I followed the silence, I replied, and it made him smile, soft, unguarded. We didn't talk about Karen or Shannon. We didn't need to. The quiet between us had changed. It wasn't made of fear anymore. It was made of peace. He brewed another cup, poured it for me, and we sat watching the light move across the lake. The same man who once measured life by quarterly reports now watched ducks drift by like it was enough. A few weeks later, he called to tell me he'd watched my latest documentary, the one about daughters who grew up unseen, who found their voices too late and used them anyway. It hurt, he admitted, but I'm proud of you. You had the courage. I didn't. That night, I stood on my balcony, overlooking the city lights, and felt something loosen in my chest. The frost that had followed me for decades was finally melting. I kept filming stories of women like me, stories of quiet revolutions. The first screening sold out a small theater downtown. When the credits rolled, people stood to clap, and I spotted him in the back row wiping his eyes. For years, I chased a kind of love that demanded silence. Now I knew better. Real love listens even when the truth hurts. I used to think revenge meant fire something loud, final, destructive. But standing there after the screening, watching strangers hug each other and whisper "me too," I realized it could look like light instead. Quiet, steady, unapologetic. That night, I packed my camera bag for the next trip. The same bag that once carried proof of betrayal now held stories waiting to be told. I glanced at the old USB drive resting on my shelf, the metal dulled from touch. I didn't keep it as a weapon anymore. I kept it as a reminder: truth doesn't need to scream, it just needs to survive. Before I turned off the lights, my phone buzzed a message from my dad. "Proud of you, kid? Don't ever dim what you've built." I smiled, slipped the phone into my pocket, and whispered to the quiet room, "Never again." Because that's the real ending, isn't it? Not the collapse of someone else's empire, but the moment you stop shrinking to fit inside it. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who refuse to see you, you're not alone. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And hit subscribe if you believe, like I do, that silence can be broken and truth, no matter how quiet, always finds its voice.
My name is Lena Martinez. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes love doesn't end in one big fight. It ends in quiet, invisible moments when respect starts to disappear. I used to think I was lucky to have Evan. He had that kind of restless energy that drew people in. He could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they'd known him forever. I met him at a tiny coffee shop near my office. He was joking with the barista, talking too loud, spilling sugar everywhere, and yet somehow he made it charming. I laughed even when I shouldn't have. That was Evan chaos that felt like sunlight. For the first 2 years, things were easy. He'd show up at my office with flowers, we'd take long weekend trips, and he'd talk about how he'd never met anyone who made him want to slow down. He said I was his calm. I believed him. When he proposed, I cried so hard I couldn't even say yes right away. We moved into a small apartment outside the city, a place with creaky floors and too many windows. I thought it was perfect. I worked in marketing. He was freelancing in design, so his schedule was unpredictable. I didn't mind covering most of the bills. I liked taking care of him. I thought that's what love meant, showing up when the other person's world was still trying to find shape. But around the time he turned 28, something shifted. It started with small things. He'd say, "You never want to go out anymore," or "You've gotten so serious, Lena." He began spending more nights with his new friends, people he'd met through a local art studio. They were younger, louder, always chasing the next thrill. At first, I tried to keep up. I planned surprise dates, weekend hikes, even bought tickets to a music festival just to remind him that I wasn't boring. He smiled, said, "You're trying too hard." That one hurt more than he realized. Then came the nights he wouldn't come home until 3 in the morning. Lost track of time, he'd mumble, smelling like beer and someone else's perfume. I told myself not to overthink. I told myself this was just a phase. But deep down, I felt it, the slow, steady leak of respect. One evening, he came home and said, "Let's do something spontaneous." I asked what he meant. "Let's go clubbing, with my friends." I hesitated. I hadn't been to a club in years. "You know I don't really like that scene," I said gently. He grinned. "Exactly. That's why you should come. You've gotten predictable." Predictable. It stung more than he probably intended, so I said yes. The night before, he showed me the outfit. He'd picked out a silk shirt, half-unbuttoned jeans, too tight for comfort. "What do you think?" he asked, spinning in front of the mirror. "It's a lot," I said honestly. He smirked. "That's the point." That's when I realized something painful. I wasn't the woman he wanted anymore. I was the mirror he was trying to break to feel young again. Still, I went. Because part of me wanted to believe the man who once looked at me like I was his piece still existed somewhere inside the noise. The club was everything I remembered hating. Lights flashing like panic attacks. Music so loud it made your bones vibrate. People pressed together in a sweaty blur. Evan's friends waved. When they saw him, pulled him into hugs, handed him drinks. None of them even looked at me. He disappeared into their circle almost immediately. I sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and watched him come alive in a world that felt foreign to me. He laughed too loud, danced too close, moved like someone who didn't have a fiancé waiting just a few feet away. Then I saw at the moment that snapped something in me. A woman leaned in close to say something, her hand brushing his arm. He didn't pull away, didn't even flinch, just smiled. I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, "Your drink's getting warm." He blinked, startled. "Relax, Lena. We're just talking." The woman stepped back, smirking. Evan turned away, already lost again in the beat. I went back to my seat and stared at my glass. I wasn't angry, not yet, just cold. It was like watching the last thread of something unravel in slow motion. A while later, he climbed onto the platform near the DJ booth, cheering, waving his drink, acting like a teenager at his first concert. His friends shouted his name. I walked over, touched his arm gently. "Evan," I said, "you're getting out of hand." He turned, face flushed with adrenaline. "Oh my God, don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I said, steady. "But you're crossing a line." He stared at me with that look, defiant, almost amused. Then he laughed loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You're not my mother, Lena. You don't get to tell me what to do." The world around us seemed to freeze. His friends went silent. Even the DJ turned his head. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. Really looked at him and saw the truth I'd been avoiding. He didn't see me as his partner anymore, just someone in his way. So I nodded. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't." Then I turned, walked toward the exit, and didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. I crossed the street to my car keys, trembling in my hand, but not from anger, from finality. By the time I started the engine, I knew something had ended. Not love, not yet, but the part of me that kept waiting for him to grow up, she was gone. And I didn't know it then, but that would be the last night I ever waited for Evan to come home. When I got home that night, the silence felt heavier than usual. The apartment was spotless, dimly lit, and so painfully calm that every sound, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, felt like an accusation. His shoes were by the door, the pair I'd bought him for his birthday. I stared at them for a long time before I finally exhaled. I wasn't shaking, I wasn't even crying, I just started moving. I pulled out boxes from the closet and began packing his things. Not like someone in a rage, but like someone cleaning up after a storm that had already passed. The loud kind of heartbreak had burned itself out weeks ago. What was left was quiet, methodical. I folded his shirts neatly, even the ones I hated, the ones that smelled like cigarettes and cologne. His sketchbooks, his camera, the random gadgets he never used but refused to throw away, they all went into boxes. When I reached our bedroom, I stopped at the dresser. On top was the small framed photo from our trip to the coast the day he proposed. We looked so young in it. I was squinting against the sun, his arm around me, both of us laughing. I ran a thumb across the glass, then placed it gently face down. In the top drawer was the ring box. I took it out, opened it for the first time since that night, and placed it on the counter beside a notepad. I didn't even have to think about what to write. "You're right, I'm not your mother, but I'm also not your safety net." No anger, no bitterness, just truth. By the time I finished, it was almost dawn. I stacked the boxes by the door, took one last look around, and went to bed. I woke up to the sound of the lock turning. 5:10 a.m. He still had his key. The door creaked open, followed by the uneven rhythm of his steps. Heels clacked, then stumbled. He muttered something under his breath. Probably my name. Then went silent. A pause, a gasp. He'd seen the boxes. Then the sound of paper crinkling. He'd found the note. "Are you kidding me?" His voice cracked through the stillness. "Lena, what is this?" I didn't answer. He moved closer, each step heavier than the last, until he appeared in the bedroom doorway. Hair, messy eyes, bloodshot, still in the same clothes from last night. "You really think this fixes anything?" he snapped. "You can't just pack my stuff like you're kicking out a roommate." I sat up slowly. "You should get some sleep." "I'm not drunk," he said defensively, even though his words slurred. "You're overreacting. It was just a joke. Everyone flirts when they're out. It's harmless." I stared at him. "Then maybe you should find someone who thinks it's harmless." For a moment he looked confused, as if the words didn't make sense. Then his jaw tightened. "So that's it. You're ending this because of one sentence." I took a deep breath. "I'm ending it because of what that sentence meant." He shook his head, pacing. "You're being dramatic. You always do this, take everything too seriously." That line, "you always do this," was his favorite escape hatch. Every time he messed up, he made me feel like the problem was how much I cared. "Evan," I said quietly, "do you even hear yourself anymore?" He stopped pacing, eyes darting between the boxes and the note. "You can't just throw this away. We were supposed to get married." "We were supposed to respect each other," I said. "You stopped first." For a second, he looked like he wanted to cry, but instead he laughed a hollow, desperate sound. "You'll regret this," he said finally, voice brittle. Maybe, I whispered, but not tonight. He stared at me one last time, the defiance in his eyes starting to crumble, then turned and left. The door slammed behind him, echoing through the apartment. And just like that, it was quiet again. But this time the silence didn't hurt. I lay back in bed, staring at the ceiling until the morning light began to creep through the blinds. For the first time in years, the air felt clean, like the dust had finally settled. Outside, a new day was starting. Inside, something else was finally ending. 2 weeks later, Evan was everywhere. Not in person, he wouldn't dare show up, but online. Every time I opened my phone there, he was smiling into the camera, drink in hand, surrounded by new faces that blurred together under neon lights. His captions were all the same flavor of defiance. New beginnings. Freedom looks good on me. No hard feelings, just lessons. Each post got hundreds of likes within hours. People cheered him on, congratulated him for moving on. A few mutual friends even commented, "You deserve better, bro." I didn't reply. I didn't delete him either. Watching from a distance was strangely educational. It taught me how people rewrite history when they need to feel innocent. Then one night, a clip started circulating. Someone had filmed it at that same club. The music was deafening, but his voice cut right through it. "You're not my mother. Lena, you don't get to control me." He was standing on a table, laughing as people around him whooped and recorded. I watched the clip twice, then locked my phone. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel embarrassed. I just sat there in the dark, realizing something important. He wasn't trying to forget me. He was trying to convince everyone else that he already had. The internet is cruel in its consistency. It loves a downfall as much as it loves a glow up. Within days, the comments shifted from admiration to mockery. People joked about his therapy through TikTok. Memes appeared mocking his speech, twisting his quotes. Someone even captioned his viral clip, "When your mom says no more allowance." I never shared it, but I might have smiled, just once. A few days later, he texted me, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, for the first time since the breakup, I typed back. "About what?" He replied instantly. "Everything. I miss you." I didn't mean what I said. I didn't respond. He kept trying texts, voicemails, long messages that swung between apologies and accusations. "You made me better. You broke me. You never even tried to understand me." Every time I read one, I felt less attached. His words no longer hurt. They sounded like echoes from a life that no longer fit me. Then, one afternoon, I was at a cafe, laptop open, headphones in, when a notification flashed, "Evan Martinez has deleted his Instagram account." I didn't celebrate. I just closed my laptop, ordered another coffee, and let the quiet sink in. Maybe for him, the silence was punishment. For me, it was peace. That night, I journaled a single sentence. Some people need to lose their audience to finally hear themselves. And when I put the pen down, I realized I hadn't thought about him in hours. That was the first small victory. 6 months passed before I saw him again. By then, my life had softened in all the places he'd once made sharp. Mornings started with silence and sunlight instead of arguments. I had learned to cook for one laugh alone and sleep through the night without waiting for a key to turn in the lock. Healing, I discovered, doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like folding laundry without crying over the extra space in the drawer. Then one evening I got an email. No subject line, just his name. "I owe you an apology. Can we meet?" I hesitated for 2 days before replying. Not because I wanted closure, I'd already found it, but because I wanted to see who he'd become. We met at the same cafe where I used to wait for him after work, the one with chipped tables and burnt coffee. I arrived early, sat near the window, and almost didn't recognize him when he walked in. Evan looked smaller, not physically, but in presence. His confidence had deflated into something quieter, almost humble. He smiled, tentative, like a man entering a memory he no longer owned. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I answered. For a moment, we just stared. The silence between us wasn't tense anymore, it was just space. He finally exhaled. "You look good." "So do you," I lied politely. He laughed under his breath. "You don't have to be nice." We both smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the boy I used to love, the one before the pride, before the noise. He looked down, twisting the coffee cup in his hands. "I messed up. I know that. I've been in therapy. I've had time to think." I nodded but didn't interrupt. "I didn't understand what respect meant back then," he continued. "I thought love was just about passion. But I was wrong. You were trying to build something stable, and I was too busy chasing something loud." His voice trembled on that last word. I watched him for a while, then asked, So why tell me now? He met my eyes. Because every time something good happens, I still think about how I ruined the one person who actually cared about me. The words should have made me feel vindicated, but instead they just made me tired. I took a sip of coffee, then said quietly, I cared, yes. But that doesn't mean I was supposed to save you. He swallowed hard, nodding. Do you ever think about us? I smiled faintly. I used to, but not anymore. He looked down again. That simple answer hit him harder than any insult ever could, because it wasn't anger, it was absence. We talked for a few more minutes, small things, safe things. When he finally stood to leave, he said, I'm really glad you're happy. I am, I said, and it was true. He paused by the door as if wanting to say more, then decided against it. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly as he walked out. I watched him cross the street, disappearing into the crowd. No drama, no tears, just a man fading from a story that no longer belonged to him. And as I finished my coffee, I realized something: forgiveness isn't about giving someone peace. It's about reclaiming your own. That night I wrote in my journal again. Some ghosts don't haunt you. They just wait for you to notice you've outgrown them. And I slept better than I had in months. A year later, I walked down the aisle, not toward a dream, but toward a choice. The chapel was small sunlight spilling through stained glass, painting the floor in soft colors. There were no grand gestures, no orchestra, no drama. Just a quiet hum of warmth, the kind that feels like home instead of fireworks. The man waiting for me wasn't perfect, but he was steady. When I laughed, he listened. When I cried, he stayed. With him, love didn't feel like walking on glass or waiting for the next apology. It just felt simple. Halfway down the aisle, I caught a glimpse of something or someone in the back row. Evan. He wasn't dressed for a wedding. Just a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up to hands in his pockets. He looked older, tired, softer somehow. For a moment, our eyes met, and time folded in on itself, all those sleepless nights, the tears, the silence compressed into one quiet second. He didn't smile, he didn't wave, he just nodded. A small, almost invisible gesture. I held his gaze for one breath, then turned back toward the man waiting for me. The ceremony blurred by vows, laughter, applause. When it ended, I stepped outside into the golden light, still half in a daze, and there he was, leaning against the old oak by the church gate. For a second, neither of us moved. You came, I said finally. He shrugged, didn't plan to, just wanted to see. I smiled, not unkindly. And what did you see? He hesitated, someone who really moved on. I looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, a long time ago. He nodded, jaw-tight eyes glistening, not from tears, just regret. The kind that sits quietly and doesn't ask to be forgiven anymore. I'm happy for you, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I know, I replied, and I hope you're happy too someday. For a second, he seemed like he might say something else, but then he just smiled, faintly, shoved his hands back into his pockets and turned away. I watched him walk down the empty road until he disappeared around the corner. Then I turned back toward the laughter spilling from the church, my friends, my husband, my new beginning. As I stepped inside, a strange calm washed over me. The past wasn't chasing me anymore. It had simply stopped trying. In the end, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need justice. Peace was loud enough. And as I took my husband's hand and joined the celebration, one final thought crossed my mind, a quiet epilogue to everything we'd been. You don't always have to destroy someone to win. Sometimes living well is the only answer they'll ever understand. My name is Isabella McCracken, but everyone calls me Bella. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed love was something you built with quiet consistency, not fire or chaos. Maybe that's why I never saw the cracks forming until it was far too late. When Benny and I booked this trip, when I booked it, I told myself it was our reset button. A week in Mexico, away from the gray drizzle of home, the endless projects at his firm, the slow suffocation of our routines. I called it my gift to us. He didn't know I drained my savings to pay for it, the same account I'd labeled Future Fund. Now, sitting under the thick warmth of the Mexican sun, I wasn't sure if that future still existed. The pool shimmered like liquid glass. The air smelled of coconut oil and salt. Benny lay beside me, scrolling on his phone, the glow of the screen reflected in his sunglasses. I stared at the sea instead, at the place where the turquoise waves blurred into the horizon. For a moment, I let myself believe this view could heal us. You're staring again, Benny said without looking up. I smiled faintly, just memorizing it. He sighed, setting his phone down. You always do that, overthink a good moment. His tone was teasing, but I felt the sting anyway. I'm just happy we're finally here, I said softly. Yeah, he muttered, stretching his arms. It's nice. Nice. Not beautiful, not special, just nice. I looked away before the sadness showed on my face. For the last 6 months, Benny had been somewhere else, maybe not physically, but mentally. Work stress, he said. He came home late, tired, detached. I kept waiting for him to reach for me the way he used to. He didn't. So when I found this surprise vacation package online, I thought maybe this was how I could reach him. Worth all those nights of takeout noodles and instant coffee, I joked, trying to lighten the silence. He chuckled. Let's not talk about money, Bella. You know it ruins the mood. The words were small but sharp enough to leave a cut. So I turned back to the water, trying once again to enjoy the quiet. That's when I saw her. She was standing at the swim-up bar, tall, bronzed, effortlessly radiant. Her hair fell in glossy waves, her laughter slicing through the humid air like champagne fizz. Everyone noticed her. Even Benny did. Especially Benny. I tried to look away before his eyes followed mine, but I was too late. She caught him looking, and with the ease of someone who never doubted her power, she smiled not at me, but at him. Then, as if pulled by some invisible thread, she began walking toward us. When she reached our loungers, she dripped confidence and seawater. Hey, she said, voice light and melodic. You two look new here. Her accent was a blend of somewhere warm and expensive. First day, I answered politely. She turned to Benny, eyes bright. Ah, that explains the sunblock streaks. You'll learn. He laughed too easily, too eagerly. Guess I will. I'm Lena, she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Benny, he replied, shaking it. I added Bella. Lena smiled at me briefly, but her attention snapped back to Benny like a magnet. You have to try the passion fruit mojitos at the Palapa bar. The ones here are tragic. We were just about to get another round, Benny said, though we weren't. Perfect, Lena said, signaling the waiter with a small wave. I'll order them. My treat. Consider it your welcome to paradise. I opened my mouth to protest, but Benny was already grinning. Thanks. And that was it. The door was open. For the next hour, she held court, talking about her travels, her freedom, her portfolio of experiences. Bali, Morocco, Greece. Her voice made it all sound like poetry. I tried to join in, but every time I spoke, her gaze flicked past me, returning to Benny like I was invisible. He didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and enjoyed it. When she laughed at something he said, that easy, warm laugh that seemed to curl around him like smoke, I felt something cold press against my chest. Jealousy. It had been so long since I'd felt that kind of sting, I almost didn't recognize it. I'm going to grab us some towels, I said, standing up. Benny barely looked up. Sure. As I walked toward the cabana, I glanced back. Lena leaned closer, her lips near his ear. Whatever she said made him smile, not the tired, distracted smile I'd gotten used to, but something different. Lighter. Alive. And in that moment, beneath the hot blue sky, I felt something heavy settle inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet, terrible understanding that the paradise I had paid for might become the place I'd lose everything. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. The sheets on Benny's side were cool, untouched for hours. For a few seconds, I wondered if he'd gone for a swim. Then I heard laughter from the pool below and hers. From the balcony, I spotted them. Benny and Lena at the swim-up bar. Heads bent close, their bodies angled toward each other with that subtle intimacy of people sharing a secret. Lena's hand brushed his arm lightly as she laughed. He didn't move away. The coffee in my hand went cold. When he finally came back to the room, his hair was damp, his skin glowing with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen in months. Morning, I said, forcing calm. Hey, he replied, rummaging for his sunglasses. Lena said there's a coral reef nearby. We should check it out later. We, not you and me, just we. She said, I repeated. He didn't catch the edge in my voice. Yeah, she's done a ton of diving trips here. Seems like she knows her stuff. Right, I said quietly. He looked up, finally noticing my silence. Come on, Bella, don't be weird. She's just friendly. I wanted to believe that. God, I did. But by lunchtime, Lena had joined us again, invited by him this time. She wore a white bikini and a silk wrap. The kind of effortless look I could never pull off. The waiter didn't even need to ask. Benny had already ordered her favorite drink. As she talked, her voice seemed to fill every corner of the open-air restaurant. Benny hung on every word, her stories about backpacking through Europe, the yoga retreat she hosted in Bali, the time she almost joined a documentary crew in the Amazon. When I tried to speak, she'd gently redirect the conversation always back to herself or Benny. So, Bella, she finally asked, her tone too sweet. What do you do? I'm a project coordinator, I said. Mostly event logistics and partnerships. Her lips curved into something like a polite smile. Ah, that sounds stable. Benny chuckled, not realizing the insult laced in her tone. Yeah, he said. Bella keeps things organized. She's the responsible one. Responsible. The word landed like a stone. It wasn't a compliment, not the way he said it. Lena leaned her chin on her hand. I wish I could be that grounded. I'd lose my mind in that kind of structure. I wanted to reply, to say something sharp, something that reminded her she was sitting at my table with my boyfriend, but I didn't. Instead, I excused myself to get some air. In the restroom mirror, I barely recognized my own reflection. My hair was frizzy from the humidity, my skin too pale beside the tan glow of everyone around us. I touched my face, suddenly aware of how tired I looked. When had I started fading like this? When I returned, they were gone. The waiter gestured toward the beach. Your friends went to check out the sunset paddleboards. I walked toward the shore, the heat sinking into my skin like punishment. They were silhouettes against the orange horizon, Benny holding Lena's board steady as she climbed on. She wobbled, then fell into his arms, laughing. He laughed too, a full, unguarded sound that broke something in me. That night I didn't confront him. I couldn't. Instead, I lay in bed listening to the ceiling fan hum while he scrolled through his phone beside me, smiling quietly at whatever he was reading. Who are you texting? I asked. He paused. Just group chat stuff. Work. A lie soft as a whisper. I rolled onto my side, staring at the faint outline of the ocean through the window. Benny, are you happy? He hesitated. What kind of question is that? An honest one. He exhaled. Bella, you worry too much. We're on vacation. Just let go a little, okay? Let go. The words echoed in my chest like a dare. The next day, Lena invited us to a local dinner spot, the real experience, she said. I wanted to say no, but Benny had already agreed. The restaurant was dimly lit, music, low candles flickering against glass. Lena told stories about her life, about quitting a corporate job at 28, selling everything and moving abroad. Benny listened, transfixed. That's brave, he said. It's living, she replied. Then turning to me, she added, You should try it sometime. I smiled tightly. Maybe I will. She didn't believe me. Neither did I. After dinner, she mentioned a private beach club she wanted to show Benny later. He looked at me uncertainly. You're tired, right, Bella? The words cut deeper than they should have. I'm fine, I said quietly. But he didn't invite me. He just kissed my forehead like I was a patient he pitied. Get some rest, okay? When the door closed behind him, I sat alone in the silence. Outside, the ocean roared softly, a reminder of how small I was in this vast, uncaring paradise. I waited for hours, staring at the moonlight spilling across the sheets. When he finally returned, it was nearly 2 a.m. He smelled of salt and smoke and something floral. He didn't say a word, just slipped into bed and turned away. I lay awake beside him, my heart no longer breaking, just hollowing out. And for the first time, a thought whispered through the numbness. Maybe I wasn't here to save us. Maybe I was here to watch the end. The following day, the air felt different, heavier. Even the ocean seemed quieter, as if holding its breath. Benny woke late, stretching like a man with no conscience. You should have come last night, he said casually. You'd have loved it. Would I asked. He shrugged, pouring himself coffee. Lena introduced me to some locals. The place was incredible, bonfire, live music, no tourists. She took you there. He nodded. Yeah, she's been here before, knows all the hidden spots. I stared at him. And it didn't occur to you to maybe ask me to come. His jaw tightened. You were tired, Bella. I didn't want to drag you out. I wasn't tired. I was waiting. He looked annoyed, like my hurt was an inconvenience. You're making this a thing again. Can't we just enjoy the trip? Enjoy. He said it so easily, as if joy were still something we shared. That afternoon, he left early to meet Lena for a quick surf lesson. He came back hours later sunburned and smiling, a fresh braid in his hair, the kind of messy charm he used to hate. I waited until we were back in the room before I said anything. Benny, I began carefully. What exactly is going on? He blinked. What do you mean? Between you and Lena. Nothing's going on, he said too quickly. We're just friends. Friends who spend every waking hour together. He sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. You're reading into things. Am I? I stepped closer. Because from where I'm standing, you've barely looked at me in days. You don't talk to me, you don't touch me, and every time I try to reach you, you disappear with her. He rubbed his temples. Bella, you're suffocating me. The words hit harder than a slap. Suffocating you, I repeated, disbelief cracking my voice. He stood up, running a hand through his hair. I just need space, okay, God? Not everything has to be some big emotional crisis. Space, I whispered. You needed space, so you found another woman to breathe with. His eyes flashed. You know what your problem is. You take everything so seriously. You plan, you schedule, you organize even love. You never just live. I swallowed the lump in my throat, and Lena does. She's free, he said, voice softening with a kind of awe. She doesn't care what people think, she just goes. I laughed a bitter, broken sound. So that's what this is. You're leaving me for a woman who makes you feel like a tourist in your own life. He stared at me, jaw set. I'm not leaving you for anyone. I'm leaving because I finally feel something again. And it's not with you. Silence filled the room like water flooding a sinking ship. You mean her, I said finally. He didn't deny it. I sat down trying to breathe. The air felt thick, sharp. After everything we've built years, Benny, you're just walking away. His expression softened, almost pitying. Bella, you're safe. You always have been. But safe isn't living. Safe, I whispered. You mean boring. He looked away. You said it, not me. Something inside me cracked open then, not from anger, but clarity. The kind that burns. Then go, I said quietly. Be alive, Benny. Just don't come back pretending it was love. He frowned, surprised by my calm. That's it. I nodded. That's it. He stared for a long moment, maybe expecting tears, begging a dramatic scene. But I'd already given him everything. My patience, my hope, my future fund. There was nothing left to give. When the door closed behind him, the silence was deafening. I stood by the balcony, staring at the endless stretch of sea, the same sea that had shimmered with promise days ago. Now it looked endless in another way, like grief with no shore. The night fell slowly, the air thick with humidity and heartbreak. Down by the beach, I could see torches flickering, the same bonfire where he'd probably laugh again, held by someone else. I poured myself a drink, sat on the balcony, and let the realization settle. Love doesn't always end in thunder. Sometimes it just dissolves quietly like sugar in salt water. Hours passed. I lost count. At some point, I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes, the room was darker and he was there. He smelled of smoke, rum, and perfume. That wasn't mine. I can't do this anymore, Bella, he said softly. The words were gentle but final. I nodded slowly because I'd known since that first afternoon at the pool. Then don't. He blinked, caught off guard by my composure. You're not even going to fight for me. I met his eyes. No. You already chose what you want. I'm just making it easier for you to leave. Something flickered in his expression. Frustration, maybe even guilt, but it didn't matter. He picked up his bag and paused at the door. You'll regret this. I smiled faintly. No, Benny, you will. He left. The sound of the door closing was soft, almost tender, the last mercy of a dying thing. I stood there alone, the night pressing in on every side. Somewhere beyond the walls, the ocean murmured endless, indifferent, alive. And in that darkness, one truth surfaced in my mind, clear as moonlight. He hadn't just ended us, he had freed me. The flight home was silent, except for the soft hum of the engine and the rustle of strangers flipping through in-flight magazines. I sat by the window watching the bright Mexican coast fade into gray clouds. Somewhere down there, Benny was still chasing his version of freedom. I didn't cry. Not once. The tears had already burned themselves out, somewhere between the bonfire and the moment he said, "You're safe, not living." What replaced them wasn't peace, not yet, but something colder, cleaner, a kind of emotional anesthesia. When the plane landed, I stepped out into the crisp gray air of home and felt a jolt of relief. The familiar chill, the smell of rain, even the quiet misery of the airport felt honest after the false paradise of Mexico. By the time I got back to our my apartment, the numbness had turned into a mission. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. Everything looked the same. The throw pillows he'd hated, the candle that had burned halfway down the photo of us on the shelf, smiling like strangers who hadn't met reality yet. I took a deep breath and started. First, I called a locksmith. His drill screeched through the old lock, scattering metal dust like gunpowder. When he handed me the new keys, they felt heavier than they should. Cold. Final. Then I began packing. Not mine, his. His jacket still smelled faintly of his cologne, the one I'd bought him last Christmas. His shoes were lined neatly under the bed, his books stacked in precise order. I moved through the room like a machine, methodically folding boxing ceiling. No crying, no reminiscing, just execution. Every time I sealed another box, the silence grew lighter. By nightfall, 12 boxes stood in the living room, a monument to a love that had expired quietly in the sun. I rented a small storage unit online. 30 minutes later, I was driving through the drizzle, windshield wipers, tapping in rhythm. 3 trips back and forth. Load, drive, unload, repeat. When I locked the unit and slid the key into my pocket, I felt something sharp but satisfying settle in my chest. Power. The next morning, I texted him. Your personal items are stored at Safekeep Unit number 22B. Access code 1904. Paid through end of the month. After that, not my responsibility. Bella. Then I blocked his number. I didn't even wait for a response. Over the next few days, I dismantled every trace of him. New sheets, new coffee mug, new playlist. I painted the bedroom wall a deep forest green, bold and moody, the kind of color he'd have called too much. It felt good, liberating, like reclaiming territory I'd once surrendered. Friends texted asking if I was okay. I replied, I'm fine, because it was mostly true. The emptiness that used to scare me now felt like space to breathe, to think, to just be. A week passed before the first call came. Unknown number. I didn't answer. 30 seconds later, a voicemail notification blinked. Bella, what the hell? The keys don't work. Where are my things? Call me back. His voice angry, confused, still arrogant. I played it once, then deleted it. Another day, another number, another voicemail. This is insane. You can't just lock me out. You're being dramatic. Grow up. Delete. Then came one from a mutual friend, Aaron, one of his coworkers. Bella, I know you're mad, but Benny's not doing well. That woman he met, Lena, she took everything. His money, his cards, even his passport. He's stuck there. He's been calling me from a hostel. You can't just leave him like this. I almost laughed. Can't leave him. He'd done exactly that to me, just with a prettier view. I texted back one line, not my problem. Then I blocked her too. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, sat on the couch, and let the quiet wrap around me. For the first time in months, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was sacred. Still, a thought crept in. Not pity, not nostalgia, just curiosity. Was this how karma worked? Quietly, precisely. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then, unable to resist, I pressed play. Bella, please, I'm sorry. She lied about everything. I don't even have a place to stay. Just talk to me, please. His voice cracked halfway through the way it used to when he'd try to hide emotion. I stared at the phone for a long time, then placed it face down on the table. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. And that nothing, that clean, weightless nothing was freedom. I thought silence was the end. I was wrong. It started 3 days later. Another number. Another voicemail. Bella, please. I messed up. Lena, she drained my accounts. Everything's gone. I'm stuck here with nothing. You don't have to take me back. Just help me get home. He sounded small, deflated. The confident tone that once filled rooms was gone, replaced by panic. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I was finally done being his safety net. A day later, my phone buzzed again. Different number. This time, I didn't let it go to voicemail. I answered curiosity, not compassion. Bella. Oh, thank God. It was Benny. His voice broke. You have no idea what's happened. Lena, she was a scam artist. She took everything, even my passport. I had to sleep at the airport for 2 nights. I'm begging you, just stop. My tone was even, cold. Whatever you're about to ask, the answer is no. There was a pause filled only by his shaky breath. You don't mean that. I do. You chose her, Benny. You made your decision under the same sun that's now burning you. Jesus, Bella, you sound heartless. No, I said. I just stopped volunteering to be your savior. He cursed softly under his breath, then the line went dead. I put my phone on silent and returned to my evening cooking pasta, pouring wine, opening the window to let in the sound of rain. I almost smiled. It felt cinematic, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life, a version of me who'd finally learned how to protect her peace. But karma wasn't done performing. That night, a mutual friend, Clara, the one who used to double date with us, called. I picked up. Bella, he's home, she said, breathless. He came back yesterday. Lena left him stranded. He looks awful. I'm sure he does. Don't be cruel, Bella. He's been through hell. He's saying he lost everything. Then maybe he finally understands what that means, I replied quietly. She hesitated. He said you changed the locks. I did. God, you really went through with it. I always finish what I start, Clara. She exhaled the kind of sigh that carries judgment disguised as pity. I just hope you can live with it. I already am, I said and hung up. For the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. The next morning, the text began. Bella, please. I know I hurt you. I can't eat. I can't sleep. You were right about her. I was stupid. You were my home. Please let me come back and explain. I'm outside your building. I just need 5 minutes. I didn't go near the window. I didn't reply. I blocked the number again. But the messages kept coming, new numbers, new pleas. Desperation had a way of finding cracks to seep through. Then one message stopped me cold. Do you ever think about the good times? The way you used to laugh with me? You can't tell me none of that was real. I stared at the words for a long moment before deleting them. Because yes, it had been real once. That was what made it all so tragic. But love doesn't stay love when it becomes one-sided devotion. It curdles into something else, pity, guilt, habit. He mistook my silence for weakness. 2 days later, I got another call. This time I answered before the first ring finished. Benny, I said evenly. He inhaled sharply. You answered. I won't again. Please, Bella, just listen. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know. I get it now. Everything you said. I was selfish. I thought I was chasing life, but I was just running from myself. His voice cracked raw and wet. She left me with nothing. I thought she was my spark. But all she did was burn everything down. There was a long silence. I could hear the wind through his phone, the faint hum of passing cars. Do you want me to feel sorry for you? I asked finally. No, I want you to see that I've changed. Benny, I said softly, you don't understand. You're not part of my story anymore. Whatever you've become, good or bad, it's no longer my concern. He sniffed. You can't just erase everything. I didn't erase it, I replied. I archived it. That's the difference. He made a broken sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. You always had a way with words. And you always had a way of wasting them. I ended the call. This time I didn't block him. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since Mexico, I felt untouchable. His chaos no longer reached me. His voice no longer had gravity. Later that night, as I sat by the window watching the rain streak down the glass, I thought about the irony of it all, how the universe doesn't need our revenge to settle scores. Sometimes it just returns the lesson with perfect timing. And for once, I didn't wish him pain. I just wished him awareness, the slow, suffocating kind that comes when you realize you destroyed something that would have loved you forever. That was karma's final gift. 2 months later, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. The same eyes, the same face, but there was something new in them. Not hardness, not arrogance, just peace. I had moved into a high-rise apartment on the east side, big windows, clean light, no ghosts. My mornings started with yoga and silence, not apology and compromise. My work was thriving. My laughter came easier. Sometimes people ask if I'm seeing anyone. The truth is, yes, a kind man named Noah. We met at a ceramics class of all places. He's gentle, funny, thoughtful. He never makes me feel like I have to shrink to fit next to him. But this isn't his story. This is about the day the past tried one last time to pull me back. It was late. I'd just finished a client meeting and was walking through the underground parking garage, heels echoing off concrete. The air smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. I clicked my car key. The headlights blinked, a quiet confirmation of routine control safety. Then a voice came from the shadows. Bella. I froze. He stepped into the light. Benny. For a split second, I couldn't breathe. He looked nothing like the man I remembered. His once neatly styled hair hung limp eyes, hollowed-out clothes, wrinkled and damp from the drizzle. He had aged not in years, but in consequence. He gave a nervous laugh. You look incredible. Benny, I said slowly, what are you doing here? I needed to see you. His voice trembled, desperate. I tried calling, but you changed your number. I had to, I replied. You didn't respect silence. He took a step forward. Please, just hear me out. I've lost everything, Bella. The job, the apartment, my savings. After Lena, nothing worked. I thought I'd rebuild, but stop. My tone was calm, deliberate. You're not here to confess. You're here to see if there's still a version of me who'll save you. He blinked. I don't need saving. Yes, you do, I said softly. You always did. You just disguised it as freedom. He looked down, shame written across his face. I made a mistake. I tilted my head. No, Benny. You made a choice. There's a difference. His eyes glistened, voice breaking. I think about you every day. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I see you everywhere. That's not love, I said. That's regret. He stepped closer, pleading now. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but if you could just give me one more chance. I laughed softly, not cruelly, just honestly. Do you even know who you're talking to anymore? He frowned. What do you mean? The woman you left in Mexico, I said, meeting his eyes, doesn't exist anymore. You broke her. And in the ruins, something stronger grew. Someone who finally learned her worth. He looked stricken. You really don't feel anything. I feel peace. He swallowed hard, his voice dropping to a whisper. I thought you'd want to see me suffer. I don't, I said truthfully. That would mean I still care enough to hate you. For a moment, we just stood there. Two ghosts from a story that no longer mattered. The garage lights hummed overhead. Somewhere far away, a car door slammed, echoing through the silence. I turned toward my car. "Bella, wait," his voice cracked. "Can we at least talk? Maybe get coffee, start over as friends?" I opened the door and looked at him one last time. "You misunderstood, Benny." He blinked. "What?" "This isn't about forgiveness." My voice was calm, almost gentle. "It's about irrelevance." He flinched as if the word itself stung. "The man you used to know, the one who waited, begged, and believed she's gone. The woman standing here doesn't have space for you. Not in her mind, not in her peace, not even in her anger." I stepped into the car, closing the door slowly, deliberately. The sound echoed through the garage like a period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Through the windshield, I saw him standing there, small, broken, still, searching for the control he'd lost the moment he let me go. I started the engine. The headlights washed over him for a second before I shifted into reverse. He raised a hand, maybe to stop me, maybe to wave. I didn't wait to find out. As I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror, not once. Because when you finally heal, you learn that closure isn't something you find in someone else's apology. It's something you create by walking away. And that's what I did. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I simply became. He didn't just lose me, I whispered to myself as the city lights blurred past. He lost access to the woman I became, the one who finally knew her worth. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, and for the first time I rolled the window down. The air was cool, clean, alive. Exactly like me.